With Resident Evil 7 being my first Resident Evil game, the franchise to me was horror. It was the first person perspective in the claustrophobic hallways. It was the relentless pursuit from Jack.
Welcome to the family, son.
And the absolute disgust of Marguerite. It was the never settling atmosphere that something could be around every corner. It was the tragic story of how the Baker family, being good people, turned them into awful monsters. It was the mold and the attempt to fight back, but you were just a guy who's looking for his wife and found himself in an absolute nightmare. I did play the 2 remake as well as Village, but whilst the Raccoon City Police Department was just as terrifying as the Louisiana Bayou Home, and Village's characters being just as memorable as the Bakers, none of them held the same presence as Biohazard for me, especially Village. Then the 4 remake was announced and I seen all the hype around it. I never played the original, but it seemed to be not just a lot of people's favourite Resident Evil, but a lot of people's favourite game of all time. So I ended up getting the game and I loved the atmosphere at the start. The forest lit by only the moon, the nervousness of what had just happened to that cop, and the feeling of approaching the Baker home was back. However, when I was prompted to parry an enemy's attack and then booted them back into the RPD, it dawned on me that this game wasn't for me. Again, it just wasn't 7. It was an action game. It was a good one from what I played, but it wasn't what I was looking for in a Resident Evil game. Now fast forward 2 or so years and Resident Evil 9's announced. It's bringing back exactly what I liked from 7. The scared character, the first person perspective, the dark, tight corridors and hideous monsters to run from. But the other half holds a focus on Leon's action-focused playstyle. So, I decided to pick up 4 Remake once again, and I wasn't expecting much, but I got it all. The game kicks off with a cutscene showing the cult performing a ritual on a younger girl, instantly raising questions about what they're doing, who they are, and if the girl has any importance, or does this just happen to all the hikers that come through. Then we're reminded of the events that took place in Resident Evil 2 and 3, before giving you a quick catch up on the events of Leon's life in between then and now. Now at this very moment, Leon's being escorted to where they believe is the location of the President's daughter, Ashley Graham. The mission is to find her and get her to safety. One of the escorts doesn't come back after deciding to go for a piss, so naturally, the other cop does absolutely nothing and sends Leon to check it out instead. It goes without saying that the game looks great, but it was the atmosphere of this first moment that really captivated me. The blue lights of the moon barely breaking its way through the overgrown trees, and the fog that's sitting on the ground showing how cold this night is. Of course, in Resident Evil fashion, there's dead things along the way as well as things that look weird. In what looks to be an abandoned house is a very not abandoned house, but the owner doesn't really seem to give a Okay, maybe he does care about trespassing a little. We find the cop and it's safe to say that he's been better. Action ensues before getting cornered and hearing what would be the first of many cheesy action lines.
I'll let myself out.
And then the game kicks off. I made my way to the famous village section where the entire population of Fordwich is burning the other cop alive, and then they turned their attention to me. It'll come as a surprise to no one that the action in this game is great. Playing the game as its own thing, completely disconnected from the experience of Resident Evil 7, and I really started to enjoy the feeling of being a trained agent who's more than capable of dispatching a village of cultists. The parry mechanic can feel like cheating if you get really good at it, but to offset the parry there's usually enemies in swarms, so parrying one attack could leave you open to receiving a hit elsewhere. Enemies also have throwables like dynamite and molotovs that you need to be cautious of. You can of course take the liberty of shooting the throwables whilst they've still got a hold of them, leading to some very satisfying and explosive gameplay. Another strategy you can use is to lure the Ganados into groups like its Kino the Toten and use dynamite or molotovs against them to take out their own groups, without wasting your own precious ammo. Speaking of ammo, let's quickly cover the economy. Just like in other Resident Evil games, you have limited inventory space, meaning you have to manage what you want to carry. Do you want to carry more guns in your inventory with less space for other resources, or do you prefer only a couple of guns but hold lots of ammo and heals? It came as a shock to me to see how many guns there actually are in this game. There's a range of pistols, magnums, shotguns, SMGs, marksman rifles, and some even more unique weapons like the bolt thrower, which is unique because I never wanted to use it. Leon can also craft and find flashbangs, grenades, and bigger grenades. To facilitate the range of weapons, the game generously gives you 8 quick slots, Overall, the game is longer and provides you with more ways to play than Resident Evil 7, and when I went back to replay 7 after 4, it was more annoying than anything with having such limited inventory space. I don't mind the fact there's only 4 slots for guns, that makes sense, but the smaller inventory size in combination with things like not being able to craft with items you're picking up, and not being able to swap items like the shotgun for the broken shotgun without requiring 4 slots in your inventory, was a bit of a chore, and causes the player to backtrack more and more. However, it does also force the player into a gameplay style. You have to decide if you want to take the crafting items for the grenade ammo, or do you want to go full on the flamethrower or the shotgun. The game is more linear in that sense. It adds weight to your choices and further emphasises the survival horror by restricting what you can carry. In the 4 remake, this wasn't as punishing. I had more freedom of choice with the focus being on survival action more than survival horror. But that being said, had someone told me that this game would have points in which I would feel helpless and more scared than at any point in the Baker home, I'd call them a liar, but I'd soon find out the truth. Before jumping ahead, I should mention that I played this game through on standard difficulty. Ammo was usually plentiful, and for the most part I leaned heavily into the pistols and magnums when I could, but I did buy every gun and try them at some point. Some I liked, some I loved. There was the bolt thrower. Back in the village, the waves of enemies don't stop coming. Initially, I just tried running, looking for a way to stop them, but I couldn't find anything. Eventually, I put my John Wick suit on and started taking them out one by one. Parrying and booting became second nature and way more fun than I imagined it to be. There's a certain pump that you get out of stunning an enemy and then getting the chance not just to kick them, but the other 3 enemies around them. It's very satisfying. Eventually, one of the more sadistic looking faces in gaming came through the gate, and it just so happened to also be carrying a chainsaw. If I've learned anything from 7, that's not good. Things were feeling really good at this point. I was enjoying the gameplay far more than last time, I was intrigued by the setup for the story and wanted to see where it went, and honestly, was just having a blast. But it wasn't until the next few chapters where things clicked for me, and I knew that I would see it through to the end.
Where's everyone going? Bingo?
The stakes were heightened when I found Ladies Man 217, but then instantly I was captured alongside him.
Are you username Ladies Man 217?
Leon gets injected with something which I can only assume is the cause of the infection that's spreading across this village. Then we get a cutscene from someone who we'll come to find later as Lord Sadler, the leader of this cult. Afterwards, we're introduced to my favourite character in this game, the Merchant.
Over here, stranger.
From him we can buy resources, new guns, as well as upgrades and treasures. He also provides you with numerous stims, some of which I keep repeating in my sleep.
You okay, Joe?
Hello, stranger.
Before I found the Merchant, I saw these blue medallions, and since video games turn people violent, the first thing I thought to do was shoot. 1 out of 5. Huh. I tried to find the rest, and after some searching I managed to get them all and nothing happened. It wasn't until finding the Merchant and the blue request where I realised what it was for. You complete little fetch quests and hunts to trade for spinels, which you can then buy things like maps, gun attachments and more jewels. I was surprised to find that if you get the bounty for the blue medallions before actually shooting them down, their position is then located on the map. This doesn't go for all bounties. Killing rats and finding snakes you've got to do off your own back, and you've got to search for them yourself. In the later game, the position of these medallions do get harder and harder to the point where I wouldn't have found some without the use of the map. So the inclusion of this is a one that I'm not sure I like, but a one that I did use for the sake of ease. Realistically, had I not been able to find one, I would have just looked up a guide anyways. Some of the bounties ask the player to backtrack, however you may already want to do this to revisit previously seen areas and search for new treasures from locked drawers or puzzles that require certain keys and elements. Backtracking is often, but it's done in a way where treading your steps doesn't feel dull and tedious, but usually adds a new challenge or changes the layout. For example, after the church we need to backtrack back to the village and the tower collapses. The new infected wolves join the roster of enemies. This slight change in the environment keeps the world moving forward. It makes you feel like you're progressing despite going backwards. If I told you how the start of the game would go, you would probably say it sounded boring out of context. We go to a village and we have to get a key for a gate, so you go through a valley. Once we get the key, we go back to the gate, then up to a church where we find we need to get a key to get in. Then we have to go to the lake to get the key, but to get the key we need to go find 2 other keys to unlock the church key, then we get that, and then we go back and then we unlock the church. Fucking hell, first try. Holy moly, whoa! But it's what happens in between and the small encounters we have that we remember, not the backtracking. The tower collapsing, the encounters with Dr. Salvador, the village chief manor, and the brief but brilliant moment with Mendez. A moment that really stood out to me was after getting the key for the town hall. All the other houses around it look familiar, regular but uncanny at the same time. The town hall was the opposite. It was haunting. The fog that lined the floor of the forest in the intro sits around tables of skulls. As you walk in, you're opposed with a painting of a hooded man. He's clearly important and worshipped. This is Sadler, the same person that we saw in the vision just after being infected. The room gives the impression that you're going to face something here, something dangerous. Maybe it's just my paranoia from the dimly lit room drowning in fog, but there's a table with a huge skull on it. We as the player can compare it to Leon, but if that wasn't enough, it's also surrounded with other human-sized skulls, putting its sheer greatness into perspective. I half expected to touch it and receive a vital piece of lore, but instead it foreshadows what's to come. I remember thinking about what it could belong to. The snapped mandible told me that this thing was likely once human, mutated to the wicked design of Resident Evil's world. Speaking of foreshadowing, when I found the map of the lake that shows us where the key would be hidden for the church, the incomplete words made it very clear that the monster would stop us from getting it. When I read that, I honestly didn't even take it into mind until I got onto the lake. Del Lago, the mutated salamander, was a fine first boss. It's a gimmick that acts as more of a spectacle of what the Plaga can do to creatures and a small insight into what could become of humans. Along the way to the lake, I saw a giant hammer, and Leon says,
Good luck finding someone big enough to use this thing.
Then the next room was the size of an arena, the perfect place to fight something giant. I got distracted by the infected dogs and completely forgot about the weapon, but whilst exploring the space afterwards, I noticed a large gate that's barricaded. Standing next to it and you can hear... Up until this point I was playing the game on and off, and because of that I was forgetting things I'd done previously and I still wasn't sure if I was going to finish it. Del Lago was an interesting showcase of the Plaga's capabilities, but it wasn't until... This was bingo. This was it, the exact moment I knew I would finish this game. I think I had the same reaction as Leon does.
God damn, you're a big boy.
El Gigante isn't some gruesome, hard to look at monster that you might expect from Resident Evil, that would come later, but it was still a giant, unexpected fight where action shines and horror takes a backseat. As well, it was the world building and setup that I enjoyed so much. The answers to my questions were revealed in a single moment. I started pouring my ammo into its face and before long the parasite would reveal itself.
You got worms too?
Does Leon have worms? Is that canon, or is he referring to the other infected? I like to think that the trained agent on a mission to save the president's daughter is silently battling with worms. And as I thought I was approaching the end of the fight, the wolf I saved before, idiot, got stuck in a bear trap. I love the over-the-top dramatic lightning striking cutscene as the wolf howls before attacking. It's so cheesy, but it's all done in a way that's just, it's always funny, it's never cringe. I don't often find games funny, but some of Leon's lines genuinely made me laugh out loud at times.
Yeah, fat chance.
The fight took a few attempts, but each death was a lesson, not a loss. I learned how to dodge its attacks, how to slip under its legs to completely avoid being in the way. I learned that when it tried picking up the huts, using a flashbang or a grenade will interrupt the attack, but you still get the benefits of the loot being dropped. Now, feeling better than ever, I stormed my way to the church, grabbed Ashley, we got out of there alive, and rolled credits.
Way.
The next segment is a one that I really enjoyed, but I think is flawed. We need to take Ashley from the church, through waves of enemies, through the village, to where eventually we'll meet Luis. What feels like the entire village population is after us, trying to get Ashley back, and only you as the player can get her through. Now, this moment is intense. It's an adrenaline-fueled segment where a single wrong move could lead to Ashley being grabbed or downed and you surrounded with enemies unable to help. You can try stealth some sections or you can go all guns blazing. To help keep her alive, you can give Ashley commands to either stay in a tight formation, close by Leon, or stay back and give him space to tense those muscles and flex on the Ganados. The problem I have with this segment is after every encounter that you have, there's an option to save. Now, going in blind to this, I did save at all 3 points, purely because I didn't know what was next. But then it would repeat the encounter again. Waves of enemies, kill them, move forward, save, and then repeat for 3 or 4 times before getting to the house with Luis. Had this section had just one less save opportunity, I think it would have been better. It adds to the tension of the mission. It makes you think about where to place your grenades. Should I use my flashbangs to stun the brutes, or should I reserve them for the plagas? It adds weight to each choice you make, because if you make the wrong one, your mission can easily end due to being overwhelmed or actually being captured, and you have to restart. Now obviously, dying at the last hurdle and being thrown back to the start with the church would be annoying, but 3 saves feels excessive and took away from that sense of urgency and pressure. But then the game instantly turns it around with the house raid. Working with Luis, I had to survive waves of enemies, using the resources around the place to barricade windows, take out as many possible with grenades to save precious ammo, and also avoid actually being attacked. The longer it goes, the harder it gets as Ganados take to the top floor with ladders and brutes break in with hammers. Eventually, I managed to survive when Ashley gave us a way out. Just after we managed to escape, Luis breaks the news that both of us are infected with the plaga, so the mission to get off this island just turned into a mission to survive on the island. As the weather worsens and the situation becomes more dire, I went to look for a place of safety but instead found myself being chased by Mendez. Luckily, some yellow paint led me to where I needed to go. Thank God the Ganados have paint, otherwise I would have been completely lost here. I just wish that Capcom would also add a feature for Leon to talk to himself while doing puzzles so I didn't have to use my own cognitive functions. Anyways, I found a barn to hold out in whilst the storm passes, and then I was slapped with some great comedic timing.
Be careful.
The Mendez fight was a lot of fun. It's pretty straightforward, but the best part about this fight is his nightmarish design. The first part is short, but it gives us the chance to get some backflips in, which is always nice. The second phase is longer and consists of more dodging and waiting, but after a couple of attempts, I finished him off and claimed his eye as a trophy. It's only the cell, which seems to be a trend amongst the bosses. I thought there'd maybe be something to do with it, like maybe being able to use them to trade for special weapons or unique charms, but instead, they're just sold for $1. You know, before I mentioned about how I was playing this game on and off at the start, and so some details I'd completely forgotten. Well, one such detail was that I saw a giant castle perched on the other side of the lake. So when I first saw the Salazar castle, I actually sat up closer to my monitor in complete shock. I know there was a castle in Resident Evil 8, but this was different. The architecture, the grand scale of it, and the unexpected setting was just so much better than any plot twist that could have happened. It's at this point that I realised this is Resident Evil. After the revelation that 2 games can be set in the same universe but play completely differently, I set off into the castle with my new love for this survival action genre. After meeting what might be the video game equivalent of Joffrey,
Mr. Kennedy, who the hell are you?
first true horror sequence began. The grunts, moans and scratches of something, a monster I assume, that patrolled the basement. The paranoia was justified after reading a note. It described a man, a torturer, in a family of torturers who stood out for being particularly good at his job. He enjoyed it. He was then turned into whatever was making the writhing moan of curses. When I came face to face with it for the first time, I almost entered a state of fight or flight, and whilst I had the firepower, my body couldn't help but recoil. After sneaking around him, I realised I needed to get the gate open, but to do so, I had to make some noise with the crank. I thought that there was no fighting back, so I kept trying to distract it by throwing grenades in the corner, just anything to keep it away from me. It didn't work. I then realised I'm not Ethan Winters in this game. I'm Leon motherfucking Kennedy.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
I actually would have preferred this to be more of an unbeatable enemy, one that you need to run from. If you're caught, you're insta-killed. It's only this specific Garrador that has a backstory, about it once being someone gifted at tormenting others. Had this been a one-time encounter that Leon had to survive by running rather than fighting, I think it would have added a bit more weight to the experiments and the backstory that we've just been given. It was chained up due to seething rage that pushed it to kill anything it sensed. But Leon kills it, just like all the other Garradors. Rather than just complaining, I'll give a suggestion. This would be the first Garrador. Sadler created it because of how dangerous the man before him was. Making him a monster with that same intent would be more than lethal. It proved too lethal, it became uncontrollable, so it was chained up, locked away. Others were experimented on, more Garradors were made, but these ones, whilst as kill hungry as the others, obeyed its master. It could be controlled and, if needed, killed. The castle is, for the lack of a better term, fucking huge. Each wing, each floor, each encounter felt different from the last. With the castle comes new foes, the zealots, the red-robed priests and the armaduras. the zealots and the priests brought a new mechanic. When the priest waves his lamp, the plagas are pushed to evolve. For the zealots, this means their heads are ripped apart and they become more aggressive, using their tentacle thing to attack. For Leon, this causes the plaga to stun him as he fights against its inflictions. The armaduras require precise aim or a lot of firepower. You can take your time chipping away at the exposed flesh to reveal its full head before exposing it to a flash of the sun, or you can brute force it with heavy fire and knock its helmet off instead. The armour works as intended. They're slow but dangerous, especially in packs which they tend to attack in. The castle's huge and I'm not going to go over all of it, but my favourite moments were the water room as you work with Ashley to turn valves, trying to protect her and yourself from wave after wave of enemies. The maze offers a unique challenge, and for someone as deficient in a sense of direction as me, this took longer than I'd like to admit. The elevator sequence was thrilling, and as was the armoured giant that's throwing boulders at you. Then getting to use a cannon to take it down was just so incredibly over the top, but it can't be described as anything but Resident Evil fun. Those action Leon sections are a juxtaposition to when I swapped to Ashley. Leon's captured and Ashley decides she's no longer going to run, but instead she's going to be the one to save Leon now. I swapped to her, and now everything I faced up until this point just became significantly more dangerous. I made my way through the library, avoiding the patrolling armors at all costs. It was a nice reminder of how terrifying and hopeless you can be and feel in Resident Evil. Within the section I found that the blue torches actually caused the plagas to completely freeze up. This made me think about the merchant and his purple flame. Is that how he's safe in every space that he sets up shop? I also realised after this that the merchant also has his own lamp with the same blue light that Ashley uses. This style of world building that answers questions players may raise without ever outright stating anything isn't unique to Resident Evil, but it's well executed here. Since there's no definitive answer, it leaves it open to interpretation. Is it something to do with the UV of the lights, or is it certain fuel that's burning that causes them distress? Well, that's up to you and me. Whilst on the subject of world building, from the moment the game starts it establishes it's in a European country. Words and sentences are often wrote in Spanish, with only some being translated to the player. Some words like lago, gigante and plaga can be assumed by the player as they aren't too dissimilar to their English counterpart. Lago being lake, gigante is giant, plaga meaning plague. But some terms and phrases aren't obvious, at least not to me, someone who failed Spanish class. For example, ganados. The name delegated to the villagers. I had no idea what that translated to, but it means cattle. That makes sense, given their role in the hierarchy of the Los Illuminados cult. Even that name, Los Illuminados, it means the enlightened ones, enlightened by the plague, plaga, that Lord Salada worships. Finding out what some of the names translated to gave me a second wave of awe, the first being when I first saw the thing. The Garrador roughly translates to the claw, the Verdugo, executioner, and yeah, that's fitting. Everything being named in a foreign language to what the main protagonist speaks adds to the concept of being a stranger in a strange place, being somewhere so uncanny. Although this village and castle could be based off a real place in Spain, it feels disconnected from the real world because it pulls from themes of 18th century architecture and fashion, furthering the disconnect of someone living in the 21st century. Back to the castle, and at this point I had saved my piggy bank up and decided to buy the rocket launcher. I felt unstoppable until I realised what I'd failed to read. A single-use rocket launcher. But for the past year or so, I've always tried to actively not hoard items for the right moment, since that always ends with me rolling credits on the game with a character inventory more valuable than a LEGO YouTuber's collection, so I wanted to put it where it would hurt. But first, I would need to help Ashley after she was kidnapped. Again. Hey, that's the thing! After making my way through the sewers, I came across a lab. Having flashbacks to the first Garrador, I kept moving as silently as I could, making my way to an elevator, but first it needed power. This section reminds me of Alien Isolation, and surprisingly, Predator Verdugo kinda looks like the Xenomorph. As the elevator patiently made its way up, I ran for my life, using the liquid nitrogen to try and slow it down. Did it work? Yes. Did it stop it? No. I poured a lot of ammo into it as well, but nothing seemed to take it down, so I resorted to plan B.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man.
Just don't stop running. I was breaking ankles like Prime Kobe and eventually got to the elevator and escaped just in time. Then I met up with Luis and I traversed the mines, discovered bugs that camouflage and jump scared the shit out of me, and then just as I was feeling a connection with him, Luis was stabbed in the back by Krauser. The game doesn't tell you who he is, so I assumed he was someone from a previous game that I hadn't played. He clearly knew Leon. The whole fight he's calling him a rookie and talking about training him as well as missions that they've been on. I hated this fight if I'm completely honest. It was just a back and forth of slashing and parrying, and the only reason it goes on as long as it does is so the lore can be explained. After the fight was over, I realised I've played Resident Evil 2. I haven't played 3, but I know that takes place before or during the same events and doesn't have Leon as a character. So when did Krauser actually get introduced? Well, it was actually in this game, and turns out that was the same for the original as well. It's later explained in a note who he is and what his motivations are, but I didn't really like the way he was just thrown in here. It establishes a timeline outside of the games and expands on Leon's life, but it felt like his reveal was a bombshell and fans of the games were supposed to be surprised at his betrayal. Even if they just mentioned him a couple of times prior to meeting him, I think that would have been enough to add more credence to his reveal. Anyways, that was the one and only boss I didn't like in the game, and he also has a second fight which I really did like, so I can forgive the game for this blip. After saying bye to Luis, I made my way back and I finally got the chance to fight Joffrey. That was so satisfying. After a nice boat ride with Ada, I got to the island.
See you later.
And I'm a bit torn on it. I really liked the lab sections and the introductions of the regenerators and the option to go Sam Fisher on my enemies and try stealth my way through, but on the other hand it felt a bit too distant from Resident Evil. Like I had actually just started a Splinter Cell game. Helicopters, miniguns, turrets, RPGs being fired at me. It felt like the military were an actual military rather than a cult. And I know this area is supposed to feel that way, but I think of all the acts in the game, this is probably my least favourite. However, that being said, the lab was a joy. A fucking horrific joy, but a joy. As soon as I got in there and something went running past, I knew my pants and I would have something in common. We'd soon be eating shit. The reveal of the regenerators genuinely had me tweaking. Every dark hallway I stared down, I felt like a goon in Gotham waiting to be jumped. The name for the enemy is actually rather complex, so I'll explain. They're called regenerators because they have multiple parasites acting as organs, and you need to destroy all of them, otherwise they regenerate. Yeah, I suppose it's not as bad as Transformium. To help with them, you can get a biocenter scope that you can add to rifles to view their internals and make it a lot easier to kill them. And get this, you can add it to the SMG. I wish I knew this on my first playthrough. What the fuck? The way they relentlessly pursue after you is so creepy. Like their arms can stretch far distances to grab you, and if you blow their legs off they just start fucking body surfing after you. And to make matters worse, there's a harsher, more lethal version of them that fire out spikes and it just looks repulsing. Speaking of repulsing, the final boss is fantastic. A real spectacle of a fight, and unlike the final boss of 7, it's an actual fight rather than just a gimmick that takes 6 shots and dies. I wish I had an RPG to fire into Sadler, but I'm glad I didn't, because running from this giant amalgamation of disgust and doing completely necessary backflips over his arms was just immense. Oh, thanks Ada. And then I took Ashley into the sunset and rank B? B? I swear to God, I was hitting every shot imaginable, and to be honest, I don't even remember dying that much. You'd think the video would end here, but the game doesn't. I'd already bought the Separate Ways DLC, and so we're straight back into it, boys. But this is where I made a fatal mistake. After completing the game, I noticed there was an achievement for completing the main story on hardcore difficulty with an S+ rank. So now, with 14 hours under my belt, I was what some people would call overconfident, but I would say I was fucking gaming. I chose to play the DLC on the hardest difficulty because Lord knows I want that 5 seconds of dopamine when I see the achievement pop. Little did I know, there was no fucking achievement. Going in oblivious to this, I only knew 2 things. Be quick and don't save. So I ran through as many enemies and areas as I needed to. Each boss felt like a fucking nightmare as my ammo depleted over and over again. I started to think there's surely no way this difficulty can be that much harder. This isn't professional, it's just hardcore. I was getting on fine. Sure, things were hard for a while, but I was managing. Hardly, but I was moving forward. Then I got to the giant fight. Ada's grapple hook fundamentally changes the way she plays and explores. Like with the castle, the way she navigates around the areas that Leon took time to path out, Ada just grapples around taking the high walls to avoid engagement and remain undetected. Or, like with the maze, she just hops over because she doesn't have the time to waste on dead ends. With this boss, you have the ability to take the high ground and move around the giant, taking different angles to get at its parasite. But 4 attempts later, I kept running out of ammo. This is when I realised 2 things. 1. The rifle was absolutely needed. Trying to beat the boss with just a handgun and an SMG and a crossbow wasn't going to work. I also found out that I completely missed picking up a free rifle that I could have gotten earlier. I was completely running out of ammo each attempt and it felt like I had barely done damage to the giant. Even when I placed every shot I could, I wasn't getting anywhere. And 2, there isn't even an achievement for doing this. I had unintentionally railed myself. My confidence now at an all-time low. I was contemplating what I should do. Try and persevere and beat this challenge, or end it now and return on standard difficulty. A cry in the shower and one motivational speak later.
If you're tired of starting over, stop giving up.
I decided to stop being a little bitch and get on with it. So, I ended up going back, tracing my steps, picking up ammo in the rooms I ran past. I searched every crate, I bought the rifle and I returned. I beat the boss on the first try. This time I actually played the game, searching and exploring along the way, upgrading my weapons and just enjoying it how you should on your first playthrough. The DLC was really good, and can I just say, I really liked the voice of Ada, but I don't like the delivery of some lines. They felt ordinary, I think. I understand they're going for a I do this every day direction with her doing a job for whichever her shady boss she's hired by now, but lines like
See you later.
felt so misplaced. I want to stress that out of all the voices, I actually think this is my favourite. The voice suits her personality and character design, but the delivery was definitely off on some occasions. However, they were great in others, like with these lines.
Not a bad move. Very smooth.
Seeing another side of the story, or at least how she fits in with Leon's side, was really neat. I didn't even consider that the bell being rang was Ada helping out. I assumed it was something the game was setting up about how the cult are a hive mind and are responding to Sadler's actions. One of my favourite moments was at the church, where you can actually hear Ashley crying. It stitches the two stories together without any thread. The game doesn't point it out, it doesn't force the player to engage with it and pick up on the detail, but for those who are interested, it stands out as the devs thought to put this detail in there. The highlight of the DLC for me was the bosses. The second Verduga in particular was really good. The design for it was much better than the other, I thought, although the two sections they appear in are completely different situation and atmosphere wise, so it kind of makes sense why they're so different. I think my favourite part of the DLC was when we reached the facility with Monster. Reading the note about how he was hated for being deformed and after numerous experiments became an unstoppable beast impervious to conventional weapons, it creates a level of fear about the unknown and what you're about to face. We have to run from it, eventually leading it to a grid of lasers to put this threat down. The way she jumps through the lasers really highlights Ada as an acrobatic and badass spy. I don't know why he didn't just do that. Again, towards the end, it starts feeling too action-packed and the whole dynamic leans more into spy movie territory than Resident Evil, which sounds dumb considering Ada's occupation and the main plot of the game being a guy searching for the president's daughter. But the game started off in a village of cultist farmers and ending on an island of mindless military ops with machine guns and turrets, and I didn't like it too much. Actually, no, that's a lie. That's a straight up lie. I did like it, I just thought it was weaker than the other acts in the game. And to finish it all off with Wesker and the setup for Resident Evil 5, which again, I have not played yet. Rank B again! Since finishing the game, I've replayed 2 Remake, 7 and Village, and I've came to the conclusion that whilst these games are all good on their own, as a Resident Evil game, I much prefer the approach with 4. It's a perfect blend. 2 is much more survival horror based, whereas in this I wasn't finding myself starved for ammo or health. There was a point in the 2 remake where I was running around one shot for a solid hour before I found something to actually heal with. Likely bad resource management, but the stakes were intense. Every pickup of ammo felt earned and every heal was a reason to be smarter in my next encounter. 4 has the longer story that doesn't drag. Even Biohazard, with its short story only lasting around 6 hours, started to drag on from the boat section and onwards. 2 was well paced and I don't think it overstayed its welcome at all, but I prefer the linear story of 4 rather than replaying it as a new character in the same kind of locations. The franchise is a spectrum, from pure action to pure horror. Somewhere in between is where Resident Evil 4 lands, and I land with it. I've replayed the game since. The opening fight I must have replayed at least like 5 times now. It's just a great intro into a near perfect action survival, cheesy, fun, over the top, adrenaline fueled fun game. And now I know what Resident Evil is to me. It's not one set perspective, it's no tight hallways or open lakes, it's not just a helpless character running from a great threat or another that punches boulders. It's not just the mold, the T-virus, the plaga, it's everything, it's all of it. It's not just Resident Evil 7, 2, 4, whatever, it's Resident Evil. It's the whole franchise. I love this franchise. Biohazard got me into Resident Evil, but it was 4 that cemented the franchise for me. The one that makes me want to replay the other games and play the ones I've not touched yet. Requiem is around the corner and the remake for the original first game is sat in my library waiting to be played. I have no doubt that at some point I will get around to experiencing the rest of the games as well. I've heard good things about 3 and even better things about the original. I truly hope that Requiem lives up to the hype of this game, but even if it's just half as good, it'll be better than most games I played in the last year. I can safely say Resident Evil 4 is now not only my favourite Resident Evil game, but one of my favourite games I've played. I finally understand Resident Evil 4.